So we're going to go over one little quirk in the StatKey in terms of entering data. So when you look at the randomization tests, so the hypothesis tests for mean, you can upload a file. For difference in means, you can upload a file. But for difference in proportions and for proportions, it doesn't allow you to correlation as well. You can upload a file. But for the proportions, you can't upload a file. What you can do, though, so say this is for single proportion, what you can do is edit data. So over here, for this particular data set, dog match with owner, whatever that means, the original sample size was 25, and the count was 16, of whatever that, whatever the variable happened to be. What you can do, say for one proportion or two proportions, same deal. It says you've got a button that says edit data. What we're going to end up doing is I can go to one categorical variable and I can upload a file. So I'm going to upload this file, student survey. I'm going to pick a categorical variable, gender. Okay. So now I've got, say I'm looking at the proportion of males. So it's got male at 193 out of 362. So what I can do is go to a test for a single proportion and click edit data. And here it says count. I can do 193 out of 362 or whatever those numbers were. Okay. Now I have my data, my information, the stuff I want in the original sample. Now I can start generating samples for the randomization distribution based on this. Okay. So we're assuming some null hypothesis here, whatever we want that null hypothesis to be. Here we've got our sample proportion, okay? The p-hat of 0.533. If we're going to do two categorical variables, I'm going to upload a file, student survey, let's choose, gender and smoking, okay? So I've got, a breakdown of males, females, no's, yeses, and totals. Okay. So what I can do is, if I want to do something with two proportions, and again I can edit my data. I'm not going to be able to upload a file, but I can edit data. So for males, there were 27 smokers out of 193, and for females there were 16 smokers out of 169. Click OK. Now here we've got, the proportion of males who smoke is 14%, proportion of females who smoke 9.5%. The difference between the two is 4.5%. Okay, so now when we generate samples, if our null hypothesis is that the proportion of males and females smoking is the same, I'm generating these samples. It's based on the assumption that the difference between the two is 0. Okay. Here, I've got a difference of 4.5%. Here, we're assuming the difference between the two is 0. The mean of the randomization distribution is very, 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 very close to 0. And what I can do is I can do some test. Actually, I'll do a right two-tailed test, and I'll see where does 0.045 show up. Well, 4.5%. Being 4.5% away in either direction, the p-value is 0.11. That's greater than 0.05. This is, assuming a mean of 0, a mean difference, or assuming that they're the same. Having a difference this big isn't that significant, so we would fail to reject the null hypothesis here. Okay, so that's how you change the data for doing proportions.